Hey everybody, Joy here. It is Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock-ish, June 10, 2021. Look what I have here. This is a 108-inch wide quilt backing. I don't know if everybody knows about this place I buy fabric from sometimes. They used to have really, really good prices. They've gone up quite a bit, I noticed. But they're still cheaper than just about anybody else. And they sell these wide quilt backs. This is still folded in half, quilt back. 108 inches wide. So it's from a place online called thousandsofbolts.com. Thousandsofbolts.com. So they sell quilting cottons, zillions of quilting cottons, and they sell some flannels too, and these wide backs. So I got this from them probably years ago. I just bought several different colors and they've been in my stash. So I'm getting ready to do the spools. I just downloaded this cute quilting design. They're called pantographs, and would you believe if you search sewing pantographs, nothing comes up. I had the hardest time finding one. But this one's got needles and spools of thread on it. It's really cute. I think I printed it out. Hold on. So here it is. See? I don't know which way's up and which way's down. I guess that way's up. So isn't that cute? So that's what I'm going to put on the sewing machines that I just got finished today. I just think that's real simple and cute. And when I make a quilt that has a lot of straight lines in it, I like to do some kind of curvy design on top of it. And I didn't want, there's this man called somebody Hudson, Dave Hudson or somebody Hudson, and he makes real intricate designs. I bought one of his designs to do on a child's quilt. I think it's the last thing I quilted. Remember, my friend Terry brought me a couple quilts to quilt for charity, and I got that. It had a whole bunch of antique cars on it. Oh, it took forever and ever because they were very, very detailed, and it just took forever to go across that little quilt with that design. So I decided, find something simple that will sew out quickly. So I'm ironing this huge backing. It's going to be 108 inches long. I only need it to be 70 inches long. So after I get it ironed, I'm going to trim it down some. But I know that a lot of you watch me because I'm a quilter as well as a sewer lady. And guess what I just found out? You all know my friend Jeffrey, right? The APQS dealer in California, and the software teacher. What's the software called? QuiltPath. And I just found out he's in Palm Springs teaching a class today, and he's going to be going to 8 more places in the U.S. teaching QuiltPath. I texted him and I said, goodness, if you're going to be anywhere near me, he's never going to come here, y'all. He's just way, way, way too busy. He doesn't have time. It was a good idea, but now that things are back to normal and he can travel and go do his teaching, he doesn't need me doing some simple little video of him. So, if you are interested or you have QuiltPath, and you happen to live someplace where he's going, he's an excellent, excellent teacher. And you sure don't want to miss it. I'm going to be on my QuiltPath today, and I hope I can remember how it works. I did manage to get this design on it. I bought the design from Urban Elements. I think that's who it was. You guys probably saw the name of it. I think it was $15. There. So I'm pretty wrinkle-free. These fabrics aren't always the highest quality from Thousands of Bolts, but you know, I'm not making show quilts here. I'm just making fun quilts. And this is just 100% cotton. And if it wasn't double, and if it was washed, see, it's still soft, it's still nice. It's just a quilting cotton. So, I'll be back when I get myself loaded and I start quilting sewing machines. I'm so excited. I did not pre-wash any of the fabrics I made the quilt with, and I did not pre-wash the backing. So, if the backing and the quilt shrink, this will just follow it, is my guess. Dream Puff will not shrink. Finished quilt can be machine washed and dried. Dream Puff will not shrink. So, it comes in all the sizes in the whole wide world, and this is a twin size. And yes, I've got thread all over me. The next smaller size is 60 by 60. My quilt is 55 by 66, I think. 55 by 66. So this is a twin size, and it's a 93 by 72. So I'm going to open it up on my table, and I'm going to cut it the same size as my backing, and then I'm going to pin it to the back roller with the backing. I'm not going to lay it on there and sew a straight line and sew it on later. I like to just pin it to the backing and then be done with it and not have to worry about it. So, you have to clear your table off, which always makes my other table look like a thrift store or a very, very messy garage. Take your pick. So, we get this out. I do not put it in the washing machine or lay it out overnight or anything. I just use it. Now, I'm not a professional quilter. I don't quilt for anybody but me. And I quilt some charity quilts once in a while for children. And I have never had a children complain. I've never had a children. I've never had a child complain about my quilting yet. Of course, I don't know most of the children that get it, So here's the thing. You have to know which is the longest and which is the shortest, and then unfold it and cut it. And I always save the leftovers, because if you make placemats or if you make a small quilt like I'm getting ready to make for my daughter, you can use these leftover pieces of batting. They work just fine. Okay, so I am going to cut this down, pin it on, pin the top on, and then I'll come back and I'll show you what I do after I do that. So as I was saying when my battery went dead, 2 rollers. This is the bottom roller, this is the top roller. The back and the batting go on the bottom. The quilt top goes on the top. Took me a long time just to learn that much, believe it or not. I had to write it down and put signs on my machine. Oh, yes, yes, yes. So then I said I was going to mark the centers. A friction marker is the best. I'm going to mark the center of the top of the quilt and the center of the bottom of the quilt, because you want your quilt pinned on these rollers in the center. I understand that when people quilt as a business for other people, that they move the quilt up and down. They're leaders. These things are called leaders. These canvas fabric roller things, they're called leaders. That's what you pin your quilt to. And so when you quilt for a business, you don't want to put all your quilts in the center or your leaders stretch out in the middle. But as little as I quilt, I don't need to worry about that. So I've got my center marked on my quilt top. I have my center marked on my leader. So what am I missing? Who knows? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. It could be pins, or it could be, Jeffrey has something called clicker snappers or something. And I don't know if I would like those or not like them. So I just use pins still. So I'm just going to get some pins to get started here. I've got pins all over the place. I use hat pins. There's different kinds of everything you can use for quilting. Different kinds of pins, different kinds of quilt machines, different kinds of batting, different kinds of everything. So you have to decide what you like best. Some people like the flower head pins. Some people like those pins with the yellow heads on them. I think the flower pins have all different colors. But there's some flower pins that are blue, and they're really, really flimsy on purpose. I mean, you can just bend it around into a circle if you wanted to. So I'm pinning the top, the bottom. I'm pinning the bottom to this top leader right here. Pinning it in. And I use hat pins. Hat pins. Hat pin duty. Okay? So I'm just, now a lot of people don't pin it on this end. A lot of people just let it hang down. They call it floating. But I don't like mine floating. If I pin it to this end, I feel like it comes out straight. You don't end up with a whopper-jawed quilt on the sides if you have it tacked down at the bottom. Okay? So now, I'm just going to roll this up. Oh, another thing that's really nice about APQS tables, look at this. I can go up, and I can go down. How nice is that? Ah! Yes. Very nice. I have never been sorry that I bought this machine. I have always liked it. So I'm going to roll this all the way up now that it's pinned on the bottom. And then I'm going to unroll this. This is rolled up here on the top roller. I'm going to unroll the whole thing on this roller. The fluffy part will just hang loose. And then I'm going to sew the top of the quilt down to the top part of the back. You can see now that I have the back roller and nothing on it. This is just the leader. And I've got it pinned right here to the backing and the fluffy stuff. Here's the very edge of it. So, this machine has a feature that will lock it. Let me move that forward a little bit because it's kind of loose. It'll lock it. Lock it down. Tighten it up a bit. It will lock it so it can't go forwards or backwards. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put channel lock on it so it can only go sideways. That way I can see if I've got my quilt on here straight. Some people sew a stitch, and I do sometimes, but I want to kind of get it straight, and I think I've got it really, really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpin it because I have enough to work with. I have enough of it pulled forward to work with that I'm going to go ahead and make a straight line now. And for some reason I start in the middle. I have no idea why. So I can't go forward or back. I can only go sideways. So on the biggest stitch it can make, I'm going to put this up here to the line, and I'm going to sew it down up there to that line. I'll show you when I get it done. I've just sewn down the top edge of the quilt to that line. You saw me, see I messed up the line, and so I drew another one where I had the channel lock right there. Had the channel lock on, so it made a straight line. So I've got that sewn down all along the top of my quilt, and I have chosen the prettiest thread. Do you see the thread back there? Isn't it pretty? It's called Sands of Time. Oh my goodness, what's the name of the brand? Oh, I know it as well as I know my own name, but I can't think of it right now, but that is called Sands of Time. Let me see if I can get closer up. Where's the close-up button? See, it's variegated. Isn't that pretty? And on the bottom, I'm using green. Green to match the green. Okay, this is another clip I'm going to add into this video. I'm going to show you a little bit, because I only know a little bit, about the Quilt Path software. The Quilt Path software is made by the Grace Company, and it's sold by APQS. And APQS is who makes this quilting machine called the Millennium. They've got a lot of different ones. They call this one Millie for short. There's a Lenny, there's a Lucy. I don't know how many others. I think there's even a George sit-down one. That's the one I started to get. So, here is my, I think this is a Surface iPad, is what that is. And it comes with the software. And so you can see right here in the middle it says Quilt Path. Usually I have to hit it like with a sledgehammer to get it to come on. Well, let me try. Come on, come on. I don't know if you're supposed to tap it once or tap it twice. If you're supposed to stare at it. I have the hardest time getting it to come on, I'm not kidding. And you have to have it in the airplane mode. You do not want updates coming through while you are sewing out a pantograph on your quilt. It will mess things up really bad, and your software will stall and you won't know what's wrong. See, it's not coming on. So you have to push it really hard, like that, and then say, open. Let's try that. Loading. Make sure the sewing machine needle is up. It is. Needle is up, and make sure it's someplace here in the middle of your quilt. You don't want it down here, and you don't want it up there, because if it's up there, it's going to move a little bit and it might hit that bar. So just so it's somewhere in the middle. Then you hit OK. And so what it does is it moves about ½ an inch to make sure that you own the tracks and the cables and the clamps that you have to have in order for this software to work. And that's my interpretation of why it does that. I promise you, if you don't have the clamps up, these two little red what do you call them? Levers. There's two little red levers, and if they're down, this will not work. So it's checked and it sees. I actually did remember to put the levers up for once in my life. So this is their new icons. I've always used the old ones, and you can choose here to use the old ones, but Jeffrey made me use these, so I'm going to use them. Okay, so I showed you yesterday. Let me see if I can find it. I hate being this close to the camera, believe me. This is what I'm going to use. Now, since I paid for it, I'm going to use it. But since I've been working with it, I've decided I'm not crazy about it, because I like a design that I can line up to sew out so it doesn't make a column, a whole bunch of columns going up and down the quilt. But this design is such a way that I can't really move it. I'm going to work on it and see what we can do, okay? The first thing I did was I downloaded this sewing pattern that I just showed you, and I put it on this flash drive. I stuck the flash drive in up here. There's a USB, whatcha-hoozy. And then I found the QLI version of this, and I imported it into my software. And I named it, of all things, So What, since that's what it's called. Let me show you what I'm talking about, it making a column. See how the needles just line up? 1, 2, 3, and it'll be 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, and it makes a stripe. It makes columns. I don't like columns. I like it to be like have the needle here and then here and then here and then here. But I'm not able to do that with this pattern, because if I move it over, this curl runs into this curl. And so I'm not able to do it. I hope that makes sense. But I bought it, I paid for it, so we're going to use it. Alright, so here's our little screen. What we're doing is called a pantograph, but it's a digital pantograph, so we're going to go to pantograph. Now I have to tell it where the top of my quilt is, the top left, and I have to tell it where the top right is because it wants to know how big this quilt is. So I'm going to set that area. I think you can see it. I'm going to come way up here and I'm going to hit, let me put this back. I need a camera person, y'all, but I don't have one. It's very sad, really. So I'm going to hit top left. Now it wants to know where the bottom right is. So I'm basically marking a big rectangle to show it how big my quilt is and how much space we have to quilt it. So I'm just going to move this down to the other end, to the bottom right, and I'm going to make it even bigger than it really is. It doesn't matter, you want to make sure you have plenty of room. So I'm going to show the bottom right. I'm right here. So here we are. Now you've got 3 different choices of what kind of technology you can use, I'll call it. You have one that's easy, I don't know what their name for it is, but there's one that's easy, there's one that's basic, and there's one that's advanced. And those 3 dots right there are the ones that tell you. I'll show you. So you've got easy, basic, and advanced. I like basic. So we are going to now tell it the total width of the quilt. Well, didn't you just do that, Joy? No. I just told it the total width of my quilting space. I showed it a space bigger than my quilt. So now I have to show it the actual quilt space. And I think I'm going to stand up and maybe I'll quit running into the tripod. So now I'm going to click on this little measuring tape. And this is just generalizations for you guys. Just in case you're thinking, I wonder if I want some software or not. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the quilt from left to right. See, it's just a straight line. So this is going to be the left of the quilt. This is going to be the right of the quilt. So you do that next. And you move your foot over there to the left and you mark the left side. And then you come over here all the way. And I know you can't see what I'm doing. All the way to the right side and you mark the right. Then you hit apply measurement. So now, the thing about it is, the Quilt Path software is never going to come up with the same measurement you came up with. Because you always want to measure a little bit past the left and a little bit outside the right. Because as you're going up and down a quilt, your quilt won't be exactly 55 inches. Mine's 55 inches across in most places, but there might be a place that's a little bit more or a little bit less. So you always give it a little bit more. So this measured 55.227. Now I need to tell it the total height. And I know the total height is 66. So I'm going to put OK. So here is the size of my sewing machine quilt right there. That's the size of the quilt. So now I'm going to find this pattern, which is just going to be one repeat of that pattern, and then I'm going to set it up to quilt my quilt top with. Does that make sense to everybody? It's really simple once you get used to what the different functions mean. So I'm going to go to, I'm in basic, I'm going to go to select pattern, and then I'm going to find my so what pattern. So I called it so what. Where are you, so what? So what panto. Right there, and I'm going to open it. And I'm going to tell it it's a pantograph, not a pattern. They think it's a pattern because it's just one repeat. Now, I'm not going to quilt that like that, just one repeat over my entire quilt, obviously. So now I have to take that pattern and I have to tell it how many repeats I want across the quilt and how many repeats I want up and down the quilt. Another thing you need to know is the company that made this pattern, whoever drew this pattern, they drew it so it would look best in a certain configuration. And this says default print size 12 inches. I have no clue what that means because obviously it didn't print 12 inches. But they will tell you how big they expect this to quilt out for it to look its best. So I'm going to use 12 inches or less just to make sure that it looks its best, okay? It would just take too long. This video would be way too long if I showed you all the things I just did. But you can see how I started out with one pattern. Now I have 6 patterns going across, and I have 7 patterns going up and down. And you can see in the top of my quilt here, which is 55 inches by 66 inches, that there's a lot of space in between the patterns. So I want to move these patterns and so they join together closer and there's not all that space, because that would leave a puffy stripe on your quilt and it would be obvious that you didn't do a very good job, in my opinion. So if you want to change the pattern at this point to make it taller, wider, shorter, longer, there's so many things you can do to it. You can flip it, you can do everything else. One of the things you can do is you can choose none of the rows, or you can choose all of the rows, or you can choose alternate rows. Does that make sense? So whatever I tell it to do, if I tell it to go bigger one way, wider the other way, turn it around, flip it upside down, flip it sideways, it will only do those 3 rows. But if I want it to do all the rows, I have to choose all the rows. That's none of the rows, that's all the rows. So what I want to do is stretch this so it comes together and it closes up this long white gap in between. Jeffrey told me one time, just because you see it doesn't mean it's there. But I think that's really there. Can you make it bigger and look at it? Yes, but I want to stretch it a little bit first. Okay, so I've got everything chosen. So I'm going to go over here to the size button. Now, on the size button, you have steps. You can go in medium steps, big steps, jumbo steps, tiny steps, small steps. I'm going to go in medium steps. All that means is it's how wide things are going to jump. As I tell it to move taller, it's going to move tall a little bit instead of a lot. You understand? Tiny, small, big, giant, right. So I'm going to use medium, and then I'm going to come over here to this little button that shows it's going to stretch it long ways. Now you have to be careful how you stretch these things because you don't want to distort the pattern, see? But the way this pattern is, I don't think it's going to mess it up too bad. So let's go up, grow the pattern lengthwise. Did you see how it just jumped together? Did you see that? And so now there's not so much white space. Go up. Yes. All right, now that looks pretty close to me, and there's not a lot of white showing, so I think that'll be a good fill. Now, this is, of course, teeny tiny, itty bitty, all shrunk together. We need to zoom it out to full size, and you can do that. The computer doesn't like to deal with it too much, and it freezes a lot. But I am going to make it be full size so I can see how big this pattern really is. See how all of the needles are in a row? All of the spools are in a row, so it's a stripe, a stripe, a stripe, a stripe, a stripe. I don't like that. There is a way you can change it a little bit, but like I said, if I do that, my little curly cues are going to run into each other on those white spaces that I just made. So I think I'm going to have to pretty much leave it in a stripe formation, and I'm not crazy about that. Let's do this one. Yeah, that did it. So you have to take fit off. Now you can see there's a little bit of pink, 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 pink. That means it's going to fill in the little openings on the very bottom and the top and the sides, which is nice because you don't want unfilled spaces. That looks really good. All right, so now let's look at it 100%. Let's unchoose it, and let's look at it 100%. We're going to click on the, I want to call it a microphone. It's not a microphone. What the heck is it? A magnifying glass. And we're going to go up to 100%. So this is the actual real size that this pattern is going to sew out in. See? See how big it is? This is how big it is. There's the needle. See, that looks like a real needle still. That looks like a real spool of thread still. I haven't, now see, it's frozen, so I have to wait for it to catch up. See? Now what you want to look at is where those white rows were, where I was trying to fill in those white puffy places. So I'm going to try to find the bottom of the pattern. Right here it is. So this is this far away from this. This is where it's coming up into here to fill in that white space. It's pretty far from here to here, but it's pretty close from here to here. So I think I still could move it up just a tad. I think I do want to fill it in a little tad. So I'm going to go back to little, and I'm going to go back to choose everything. Is that everything? That's everything. So now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to stretch it some more. I'm going to put this on small so I can see it. Stretch. And it just bumped it up in there some more. Did you notice that? So now I'm going to unchoose it, and I'm going to go to 100%, and I'm going to see how close, how does this go? How close this curl is to this curl. Does that make sense? This curl comes up right here, and I want to make sure they aren't touching each other. So let's go to the bottom. There it is, right there. See, now I have to wait because it always freezes. Now this is what Jeffy told me. I said, look at that, it's not joining right. And he said, well, just because you see it doesn't mean it's there. So I'm going to hope he's right about that. There we are. I've got this up closer now. I'm this far away from here. I wish this would move and quit freezing. That's really frustrating. You have to wait for this blue line to get done down here. Okay. So I think you don't want this curl to be too close to that curl, and this is pretty close to that curl. And if I move this over, it's going to put that closer to that. We've got this much space here. We got this much space here. We got this much space here. It's saving it. Alright, so I'm going to give it a file name, and I'm going to call it Sew Space Test. Sew Test. And I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to make the keys go away, and I'm going to hit continuous line. It's already there, and I'm going to hit save. Now remember what you named it. So it's this, if I keep it this way, that's fine. It's called Sew Test. I'm going to write that on my paper. And today is 6/11. Won't get it mixed up with yesterday's. Alright, so what do I want to do? I want to take every other row and I want to move it to the right. So I'm going to pick alternate rows, and I'm going to hit small, and I am going to move it. Instead of up and down, I'm going to move it sideways now. So I'm going to hit move. I don't want to make it bigger. I want it to be the same size. Be careful you're not making it bigger or smaller. You're going to move it. And of course you can't hardly see it. So I'm going to hit that one time. There it went. And I'm going to hit that one time. But it looks like it's actually touching now on two of those curls. It looks like it's actually touching. So I'm going to unchoose it, and I'm going to look at it at 100%. And see if we're too close now. I'd sure like it to not all line up into rows. You can also turn a row upside down, sideways. You can do an awful lot of things with it. See, I can't see it to tell, so let's make it smaller. Now you can see these two curls right here are very close together. So I could keep moving and get it further away because I've got room at the bottom. Okay, so we will do that. Alright, I'm not sure where I left off when my phone rang, but this is what I'm going to go with right here. When I go into blow it up huge, let's unchoose it. When I go into here to look at it bigger, everything seems to flow well together. And I think it's just straight on top of each design. So the needles are all going to be pointing one way. I do not like that. But I cannot flip it because of the way the design was made. Now, if I ever get to spend some time with Jeff and he can ever teach me, I can make my own designs for in here. With something called QuiltCAD, I can draw my own designs, and I would love to do that. So now, I have my sew test pattern already. I have to tell it if I want to quilt it as a single pattern or if I want to quilt it as rows. I do not want to quilt it as a single pattern because there's no way it can, because my quilt's way longer. I don't want to do it that way. I want to quilt it as rows. So that's what I'm going to choose. I'm going to get my little pokey thing and with my left hand choose quilt as rows. And then you have to give it time. It's going to transfer the design. Now the first thing I did is that screen that you just saw, I took a picture of it with my cell phone. Because if something happens and the electricity goes off or you get hit by lightning or something, you will never know what your settings were on that page. You can still find the design, but I don't think it will show you what all your settings were. But just do yourself a favor and take a picture of all of your numbers. It's transferring the design. It's connecting. Now you have to be sure to optimize. You see all those blue dots right there? Every place there's a blue dot, it's going to stop the machine. And it's going to make me tie off, and then it's going to move to the next place and start over. And every time it comes to a blue dot, it's going to stop. It is a total pain in the rear. So what you have to do is what's called optimize. So I'm going to click on optimize. And then all of those yellow things are showing where it's going to stop and where it's going to go. And I'm going to say remove all blue dots. Do you wish to connect the first and last points? No. If you connect first and last points, when it gets all the way over to here, it's going to sew all the way back across, and come over here and connect your first point. I don't know why anybody would want to do that. There it is. It's yellow. And that's what it's going to sew, is that yellow path right there. Okay? Now what I want to do is animate the stitching. Watch this. See there? Isn't that cool? That's exactly how it's going to sew. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it over here at the beginning. I'm going to tell it that this is okay now. It's just one long sewing path. And so that's okay. I'm going to say okay. So after you optimize it and tell it you only want one long sewing, you don't want it to start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Then you have to show it on your quilt where you want it to start sewing. See? So you can start it at the top left. This one is if it's crooked, cockeyed, but mine isn't. Mine's very straight. This is top center. This is top right if it's cockeyed. This is top right if it's straight. So I always start mine at the top left. And I'm going to tell it I want to start right there. I don't want it sewing clear out on that fluffy stuff. Okay? We're going to click on quilt as rows. Here we go. Quilt as rows. Get some kind of marker that will show up good because you want to make sure you can see these marks later. Some of the quilters use a piece of painter's tape and poke a hole in it, and they put their painter's tape there, and I might do that farther down the quilt, but I always make a mark with one of these pins because that painter's tape can fall off. Okay, so you remember what we're going to do here. I'm always losing my little stylus. Hello, where are your stylus? In my pocket. In my pocket, there's a rocket. Okay, let's optimize and get rid of all those blue dots. Let's remove all. This is super most important of all. Okay. Now, we're going to say, okay. Alright, so now we're going to show it where we want it to start sewing. And I want it to start sewing way up here at the top. So I'm going to tell it way up here at the top. There. Now see how it's inside the red rectangle is the safe area, which I said it's okay to sew in all of this area right here. But I'm only going to sew in this area because I don't have any quilt out here or down here. I just always make it bigger than it really is in real life. I'm going to put a hole, and I'm going to mark the hole. This is hard to do when you're so far away. Ah, right there. I've actually got pink on the needle, but that's my hole right there. Alright, so that's where I'm telling it to start, right there. Pull bobbin. Pull bobbin is never going to be where you start. Pull bobbin's going to be way down here somewhere, because that's where it starts sewing this pattern. Okay? So now it's going to let me pull the bobbin. That's still pretty far out there. Pull the bobbin up. Pull the bobbin thread out. Pull both strings out. Make sure you got plenty of string. Make sure you're starting with the full bobbin. I haven't done this for a long time, so let's hope I know what I'm doing and I didn't screw up anything. Are you ready? Are you ready? Cross your fingers, cross your toes, and pray. Let's hit sew. Oh, that's pretty. Oh, that's so pretty. It's so pretty. I love the sand time. Let me get the camera off and I'll show you up close. Oh wow, that's a big needle. That's way bigger than I thought it would be, but I wouldn't want it any smaller or the circles would be too tight. See? And I always put my my clamps on with this little curtain rod underneath them to hold this up. Otherwise, the long arm will hit the clamps and be a mess. How pretty! Do you love it? Do you love it? Could I do this myself? Oh yeah, there's lots of ways you can do this. You can get a paper pantograph and do it from the back of your machine. You can get a little pattern holder on the front of your machine, and you could do one block at a time. Yeah, I wouldn't want it any smaller than that. You know, if it gets very small, you can't really tell what the pattern is. Look at that spool of thread. Is that fun or what? That is just way fun. And see up here? It shows you exactly where it's going. That blue part is what has sewn. And it keeps following, showing you exactly what it's going to sew next. So I have a complete pattern repeat up there. That is a complete pattern repeat right there. Yay! I'll show you when the row is done. I'll be back. I just did another needle. Coming to the very, 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 very end. Just going to jump up there and do that little bubble. And there it is. All done. All done up there and all done down here. So what do you think? I think it is darling, and I think it is just the right size. So now what you have to do is tell it where you're going to start the next row. See, it says finished row, proceed to next row, but I'm going to have to cut it off where it is to proceed to next row. Hold on. Next placement, this is the center. Oh, I hope it's not the center. This is, hello, the center of the top, and I've marked it underneath this tape too with white chalk. This is the center of the top of the next mark, which is probably going to be here in this hole somewhere because it can't sew over that stitching. So now I'm going to move my quilt up. I've taken the clamps off. Woo, that was fast. Taking the clamps off. I'm going to move my quilt up and I'm going to start row 2. Whew! See on the screen how it says you're out of the safe area, you can't sew it. And that's because there's not enough room right here to sew the next row, so I have to move it up. Okay? Makes sense. I'm on the second row. I forgot to optimize it. So guess what? I've got those silly little blue dots there. And every time you see a blue dot, it stops, tacks down, makes you start again, moves, tacks down, makes you start again. I used to have a giant sign hanging here on the bar that said, "Don't forget to optimize." And then the thread started being all loopy. So be sure you always check your thread path over here. My thread had popped out of that little lever right there, and it was sewing poorly. But I caught it quickly. I would never, ever, ever walk away and just let this sew. You gotta watch it like a hawk. But oh, isn't it cute? Lots and lots of work. But so nice to have when you're all done. I mean, people think just because you have a computer, it's like, oh, the computer did it. No, 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 no. The computer does nothing until you tell it exactly what to do, where to do it, how to do it, when to do it. Oh, yeah. So see, here you can see how the two patterns run together. Remember how I moved this pattern up into that pattern so they would be closer together and I wouldn't have a bunch of space. Yeah, that's how you do it. If I can get my camera to stay on, I'll show you now that I've trimmed all the fuzzy stuff off and all the ugly edges. Let me hold it up real high. And that is it. I'm really happy with the jelly roll that I chose. I think it turned out great. And this is going in our camper, our RV. Yeah. So, all done. It is 5:20 and time for me to go fix some supper for Burnsides or get him to take me out to eat, one or the other. We shall see what kind of mood he's in. I'll be back soon.